Lesson 16. Summarize data protection and compliance concepts. Lesson Introduction. Data protection and compliance encompass a range of practices and principles aimed at safeguarding sensitive information, ensuring privacy, and adhering to applicable laws and regulations. Data protection involves implementing measures to secure data against unauthorized access, loss, or misuse. It includes practices such as encryption, access controls, data backup, and secure storage. Compliance refers to conforming to legal, regulatory, and industry requirements relevant to data handling, privacy, security, and transparency. Organizations can safeguard individuals' privacy, ensure data security, fulfill legal requirements, and establish credibility with customers, partners, and regulatory authorities by comprehending and implementing these data protection and compliance principles. Compliance with applicable data protection laws, regulations, and standards is crucial for organizations to avoid legal liabilities, reputational damage, and financial penalties associated with noncompliance. Lesson Objectives. In this lesson, you will do the following. Explain privacy and data sensitivity concepts. Explain privacy and data protection controls. Rate your confidence. Topic 16A. Data classification and compliance. Exam objectives covered. 3.3 Compare and contrast concepts and strategies to protect data. 5.4 Summarize elements of effective security compliance. Privacy and data sensitivity controls are essential in safeguarding sensitive information and protecting individual privacy rights. Privacy refers to the right of individuals to control the collection, use, and disclosure of their personal information. It involves respecting boundaries and ensuring that personal data is handled securely and in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. Data sensitivity, on the other hand, relates to the classification and categorization of data based on its level of sensitivity, confidentiality, or potential impact if compromised. This classification helps determine the appropriate security measures, access controls, and safeguards applied to different data types. Data types. The concept of data types refers to categorizing or classifying data based on its inherent characteristics, structure, and intended use. Data types provide a way to organize and understand the different data forms within a system or dataset. Classifying data into specific types makes analyzing, processing, interpreting, and securing information easier. Regulated data. Regulated data refers to specific categories of information subject to legal or regulatory requirements regarding their handling, storage, and protection. Regulated data typically includes sensitive or personally identifiable information, PI, protected by laws and regulations to ensure privacy, security, and appropriate use. The types of regulated data vary depending on jurisdiction and the specific regulations applicable to the organization or data. Common examples of regulated data include financial information, healthcare records, social security numbers, credit card details, and other personally identifiable information. Privacy laws and industry-specific regulations often protect these data types, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for healthcare data, or the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, for credit card information. Organizations that handle regulated data must comply with relevant laws and regulations governing its protection. Compliance typically involves implementing appropriate security measures, data encryption, access controls, data breach notification procedures, and data handling protocols. Organizations may also need to establish data storage, retention, and destruction safeguards to meet regulatory requirements. Trade secrets. Trade secret data refers to valuable, confidential information that gives a business a competitive advantage. Trade secrets encompass much non-public, proprietary information, including formulas, processes, methods, techniques, customer lists, pricing information, marketing strategies, and other business-critical data. Trade secrets have commercial value derived from their secrecy. Businesses often require employees and contractors to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, to safeguard the confidentiality of trade secrets. Disclosure or unauthorized use of trade secret data is a serious legal matter. Companies can take legal action against individuals or organizations unlawfully acquiring, using, or disclosing trade secrets. Laws related to trade secrets vary across jurisdictions, but they generally aim to prevent unfair competition and provide remedies for misappropriation. Legal and financial data. Legal and financial data encompass critical data for legal compliance, financial reporting, decision-making, and risk management. Legal data includes documents, contracts, legal agreements, court records, litigation information, intellectual property filings, regulatory filings, and other legal documents. It may also encompass information related to corporate governance, compliance with laws and regulations, and legal obligations specific to an industry or jurisdiction. On the other hand, financial data pertains to information concerning an organization's financial activities, performance, and transactions, including financial statements, balance sheets, income statements, cash flow statements, audit reports, tax records, financial projections, budgets, and other financial reports. Financial data also encompasses details of financial transactions, such as accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger entries, and transactional records. Legal and financial data are highly sensitive and confidential due to their nature and the potential impact they can have on an organization's reputation, legal standing, and financial stability. Human-readable and non-human-readable data. Human-readable data refers to information that humans can easily understand and interpret without additional processing or translation. Human-readable data describes a format that is accessible and readable, such as text, images, or multimedia content. Examples of human-readable data include documents, reports, emails, web pages, and presentations. On the other hand, non-human readable data refers to data that is not easily understood or interpreted by humans in its raw form. It may be in a machine-readable format, such as binary code, encrypted data, or data represented in a complex structure or encoding that requires specialized software or algorithms to decipher and interpret. Non-human readable data often requires additional processing or transformation to make it understandable to humans. Human-readable and non-human-readable data formats have distinct implications for security operations and controls. Human-readable and non-human-readable data formats impact security operations and controls in different ways. Security monitoring, user awareness, DLP, content filtering, and web security are more directly applicable to human-readable data formats. On the other hand, encryption, access controls, intrusion detection and prevention, secure data exchange, and code/application security are more relevant to non-human readable data formats. It is important to note that non-human readable data formats can impede the capabilities of security controls because non-human readable data formats cannot be easily interpreted using traditional methods and require specialized approaches to inspect and protect them. A comprehensive security approach considers both types of data formats and implements appropriate measures to protect them based on their characteristics and associated risks. Data classifications. Data classification and typing schemas tag data assets so that they can be managed through the information lifecycle. A data classification schema is a decision tree for applying one or more tags or labels to each data asset. Many data classification schemas are based on the degree of confidentiality required. Public, unclassified. There are no restrictions on viewing the data. Public information presents no risk to an organization if it is disclosed, but does present a risk if it is modified or not available. In some government contexts, the use of unclassified may require authorization before release. Confidential. The information is sensitive but can be declassified, suitable for viewing only by personnel within the organization and possibly by trusted third parties under conditions such as NDAs. This classification does not necessarily include information requiring protection at the national security level. Secret. This level of classification refers to information that, if disclosed, could cause serious damage to national security. Viewing is restricted to individuals with a need to know. Top secret. This is the highest level of classification for information whose unauthorized disclosure could cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. Viewing is extremely restricted and monitored.
Description.
The screen is divided into two sections. The section on the left is titled Label, Confidential. A Save, Discard, and Delete this label button is at the top. The following settings are selected. Color. Select from the list, orange. Set permissions for documents and emails containing this label, not configured. Set visual marking, such as header or footer. Documents with this label have a header, off. Documents with this label have a footer, off. Documents with this label have a watermark, on. Watermark text. This document contains personal information that must be kept confidential. Watermark font size, auto. The section on the right is titled Condition. A Save, Discard, and Delete button is at the top. The following settings are selected. Choose the type of condition. Information types. Select information types, USA. Name. USA's Social Security Number, SSN. Minimum number of occurrences, 1. Count occurrences with unique value only, off. Using Microsoft Purview Information Protection to define an automatic document labeling and watermarking policy. Screenshot used with permission from Microsoft. Another type of classification schema identifies the kind of information asset. Proprietary information or intellectual property, IP, is information created and owned by the company, typically about the products or services that they make or perform. IP is an obvious target for a company's competitors, and IP in some industries, such as defense or energy, is of interest to foreign governments. IP may also represent a counterfeiting opportunity, movies, music, and books, for instance. Private/personal data. This information relates to an individual identity. Private data examples include personally identifiable information, PI, such as names, addresses, social security numbers, financial information, and sensitive data like health records, login credentials, biometric data, and confidential business information. Sensitive. This label is usually used in the context of personal data privacy-sensitive information about a subject that could harm them if made public and could prejudice decisions made about them if referred to by internal procedures. As defined by the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, sensitive personal data includes religious beliefs, political opinions, trade union membership, gender, sexual orientation, racial or ethnic origin, genetic data, and health information. EC Europe/info/law/law topic/data protection/reform/rules business and organization/legal grounds processing data/sensitive data/what personal data considered sensitive underscreen. Restricted. This classification refers to sensitive information that requires stringent controls and limited access due to its highly confidential nature. Restricted data typically includes data that, if disclosed or accessed by unauthorized individuals, could cause significant harm to individuals, organizations, or national security. Data sovereignty and geographical considerations. Some states and nations may respect data privacy more or less than others, and likewise, some nations may disapprove of the nature and content of certain data. They may even be suspicious of security measures such as encryption. When your data is stored or transmitted in other jurisdictions, or when you collect data from citizens in other states or other countries, you may not own the data in the same way as you'd expect or like to.
Data sovereignty.
Data sovereignty refers to a jurisdiction preventing or restricting processing and storage from taking place on systems that do not physically reside within that jurisdiction. Data sovereignty may demand certain concessions on your part, such as using location-specific storage facilities in a cloud service. For example, GDPR protections are extended to any EU citizen while they are within EU or EEA, European Economic Area, borders. Data subjects can consent to allow a transfer, but there must be a meaningful option for them to refuse consent. If the transfer destination jurisdiction does not provide adequate privacy regulations to a level comparable to GDPR, then contractual safeguards must be given to extend GDPR rights to the data subject. In the United States, companies can self-certify that the protections they offer are adequate under the Privacy Shield scheme, Privacy's Shield, gov/US-businesses. Maintaining compliance with data sovereignty requirements requires several approaches. Organizations ensure data localization by storing and processing data using data centers or cloud providers within defined legal or geographic boundaries. Additionally, contractual agreements with vendors and service providers ensure data remains within approved boundaries by outlining responsibilities, restrictions, and mandatory safeguards. Geographical considerations. Geographic access requirements fall into two different scenarios. Storage locations might have to be carefully selected to mitigate data sovereignty issues. Most cloud providers allow a choice of data centers for processing and storage, ensuring that information is not illegally transferred from a particular privacy jurisdiction without consent. Employees needing access from multiple geographic locations. Cloud-based file and database services can apply constraint-based access controls to validate the user's geographic location before authorizing access. Geographic restrictions impact other business functions. Geolocation requirements impact data protection practices by requiring organizations to ensure data remains within a designated boundary, such as utilizing local data centers or cloud providers. Geolocation restrictions affect data protection practices, such as data replication and data dispersion. Geolocation requirements impact incident investigation and forensics activities because they often include jurisdiction-specific data access and sharing restrictions and other legal requirements. Privacy data. Privacy data refers to personally identifiable or sensitive information associated with an individual's personal, financial, or social identity, including data that, if exposed or mishandled, could infringe upon an individual's privacy rights. Examples of privacy data include names, addresses, contact information, social security numbers, medical records, financial transactions, and, generally, any other data that can be used to identify a specific person. Privacy data and confidential data have certain similarities. Both types of data require protection due to their sensitive nature. Unauthorized access, disclosure, or misuse of privacy or confidential data can negatively affect individuals or organizations. Additionally, both privacy data and confidential data are subject to legal and ethical considerations. Organizations must comply with relevant laws and regulations, such as data protection and privacy laws, to safeguard both data types. However, there are also notable differences between privacy data and confidential data. Confidential data encompasses any information that requires protection due to its confidential nature, regardless of whether it pertains to an individual. Examples include trade secrets, intellectual property, financial statements, proprietary algorithms, source code, and other non-public information. Privacy data, on the other hand, specifically refers to information that can identify or impact an individual's privacy. Confidential data is primarily concerned with safeguarding information from unauthorized access, use, or disclosure to maintain business competitiveness, protect intellectual property, or preserve the integrity of sensitive company data. Privacy data focuses on protecting personal information to preserve an individual's privacy rights, prevent identity theft, and maintain the confidentiality of personal details. Privacy data is closely associated with the rights of individuals to control the use and disclosure of their personal information. Individuals have the right to access, correct, and request the deletion of their privacy data. In contrast, confidential data typically does not grant specific rights to the data subjects, as it relates more to organizations' proprietary information. The handling of privacy data often requires explicit consent from the data subject for its collection, use, and disclosure, particularly in compliance with privacy laws and regulations. On the other hand, confidential data, while protected, may not necessarily require individual consent for its handling, as it is associated with internal or business-related information. Privacy and confidential data share similarities in sensitivity and legal considerations. However, scope, focus, data subject rights, and consent requirements differ. While both types of data require careful handling and protection, privacy data pertains explicitly to personal information and individual privacy rights. Legal implications. Protecting privacy data carries significant local, national, and global legal implications. Many countries have specific privacy laws and regulations that dictate how personal data should be handled within their jurisdiction. These laws define the rights of individuals, the responsibilities of organizations, and the procedures for data protection and privacy enforcement. At the national level, data protection authorities or supervisory bodies enforce privacy laws and oversee compliance. They have the authority to investigate data breaches, issue fines, and take legal action against organizations that fail to protect privacy data or violate individuals' privacy rights. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, in the European Union has had a substantial impact globally by setting high privacy and data protection standards. GDPR applies to organizations that process the personal data of EU residents, regardless of their physical location. This extraterritorial effect ensures that organizations worldwide adhere to GDPR principles when handling EU citizens' personal data. Cross-border data transfers are also subject to specific requirements and restrictions. For example, the GDPR restricts transferring personal data outside the European Economic Area unless adequate safeguards exist to protect privacy data. Understanding and adhering to these legal requirements are essential to avoid legal consequences, maintain trust with individuals, and foster a global culture of privacy and data protection. Roles and responsibilities. Data controller and data processor are two distinct roles defined under data protection regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. Although they both deal with personal data, these roles have important similarities and differences. The data controller and data processor are involved in handling personal data. Both roles are responsible for ensuring personal data protection in compliance with data protection laws and regulations. The data controller and data processor must also adhere to data protection laws. They are required to process personal data lawfully, securely, and transparently. The primary distinction lies in their roles and responsibilities. The data controller is the entity or organization that determines the purposes and means of processing personal data. They have overall control and responsibility for the processing of personal data. The data controller decides why and how personal data is processed. They exercise decision-making authority, define the purposes of data processing, and determine the categories of data to be processed. Data controllers have direct legal obligations and responsibilities under data protection laws. They are accountable for handling compliance, obtaining appropriate consent from data subjects, providing privacy notices, implementing data protection policies and procedures, and handling data subject requests. The data processor processes personal data on behalf of the data controller. They act under the authority and instructions of the data controller. Data processors do not have independent decision-making power over personal data. They process data solely as instructed by the data controller. Data processors have legal obligations to process personal data only for the purposes defined by the data controller. They must implement appropriate security measures, maintain the confidentiality and integrity of the data, and cooperate with the data controller to meet their legal obligations. Data processors are also required to keep records of their processing activities. Data processors include cloud service providers or payroll processing companies, for example. A data subject refers to an individual whose personal data is processed by an organization or other entity. They are the individuals to whom the personal data refers. Data subjects hold certain rights and protections under data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. One of the rights afforded to data subjects is the right of access, meaning that data subjects have the right to request access to their personal data and obtain information about how it is being processed. Subjects can inquire about the purposes of processing, the categories of data being processed, recipients of the data, and the duration of data retention. Data subjects have the right to rectification, which means that if data subjects discover that the personal data held by an organization is inaccurate or incomplete, they have the right to request its correction to ensure that their personal data is up to date and accurate. Data subjects also have the right to request the erasure or removal of their personal data under certain circumstances. For example, if the data is no longer necessary for the purposes it was collected, or if the data subject withdraws their consent for its processing, they can request its deletion. Data subjects can request the restriction of processing their personal data. The implications are that while privacy data can still be stored, it cannot be processed further except under specific conditions. This right gives data subjects control over their personal data's ongoing use. Data portability is another right granted to data subjects. Subjects have the right to receive their personal data in a commonly used and machine-readable format, ensuring their ability to move and transfer their personal information as desired. Data subjects have the right to object to processing their personal data based on specific grounds. Examples include if a subject believes their data is being processed for purposes that are not legitimate, or if they wish to object to direct marketing activities. Lastly, data subjects have the right to withdraw their consent for the processing of their personal data. If the processing is based on their consent, they can revoke it at any time, and the organization must cease processing the data accordingly. Data subjects exercise these rights by contacting the data controller, who ensures that data subject rights are respected, facilitating the exercise of these rights, and addressing any concerns or requests from data subjects. Right to be forgotten. The right to be forgotten is a fundamental principle outlined in the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, that grants data subjects the right to request the erasure or deletion of their personal data under certain circumstances. It empowers individuals to have their personal information removed from online platforms, databases, or any other sources where their data is being processed and made publicly available. The right to be forgotten recognizes the importance of individual privacy and control over personal data. Upon receiving a valid erasure request, the data controller must erase the personal data promptly unless there are legitimate grounds for refusing the request. This right extends to the removal of data from the organization's systems and to any third parties with whom the data has been shared or made publicly available. This right may be limited if the processing of personal data is necessary for exercising the right of freedom of expression and information, compliance with a legal obligation, or the establishment, exercise, or defense of legal claims. The right to be forgotten serves as a mechanism for individuals to regain control over their personal information. It promotes privacy and data protection by enabling subjects to remove personal data when it is no longer necessary or lawful to retain it. Ownership of privacy data. The question of ownership regarding privacy data is a complex topic. In general, it is not easy to attribute traditional notions of ownership to privacy data. The ownership of privacy data is often not considered in terms of traditional property rights. Under many data protection laws, such as the GDPR, the emphasis is placed on the rights and protections of the data subject rather than determining ownership. The data subject has control over their personal data and can exercise certain rights, such as the right to access, rectify, and delete their data. However, organizations that collect and process personal data are considered custodians or stewards of the data rather than owners. They have legal and ethical responsibilities to handle personal data securely and lawfully, and to respect the rights of the data subjects. It is important to note that privacy data often consists of information about individuals, and those individuals have a strong interest in protecting their personal information. Data protection laws aim to provide individuals with control and protection over their personal data, ensuring transparency, consent, and fair processing practices. While the concept of ownership might not directly apply to privacy data, individuals have rights and control over their personal information, and organizations are legally accountable for handling the data responsibly. The focus is on safeguarding privacy rights and ensuring data protection rather than assigning ownership in the traditional sense. Data inventories and retention. Privacy laws profoundly impact data inventories and data retention practices within organizations. These laws, such as the GDPR and CCPA, require organizations to maintain a detailed record of the personal data they collect, process, and store. Data inventories. Provide a comprehensive overview of the types of data being handled, the purposes for processing, the legal basis, and recipients of the data to ensure transparency and accountability, as organizations can clearly understand and document their data processing activities in compliance with privacy laws. Privacy laws stipulate that organizations must have a lawful basis for processing personal data. Data inventories are crucial in identifying the legal grounds for data processing. By documenting the legal basis for each category of personal data, organizations can ensure that their processing activities align with the specified lawful purposes outlined in privacy laws. Organizations must collect and process only the necessary elements of personal data for specific and legitimate purposes. Data inventories assist organizations in evaluating the personal data they collect, ensuring they only gather necessary information. By keeping the inventory up to date, organizations can align their practices with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. Data retention is another area impacted by privacy laws. Organizations must retain personal data only for as long as necessary to fulfill the intended purpose or as required by law. Data inventories help organizations determine appropriate retention periods for different categories of personal data, ensuring compliance with data storage limitation requirements. Keeping accurate records in the data inventory enables organizations to securely delete or anonymize data when it is no longer needed. Privacy laws grant individuals various rights, such as the right to access their personal data. Data inventories are instrumental in facilitating the exercise of these rights. By maintaining comprehensive inventories, organizations can promptly respond to data subject requests, provide individuals with access to their data, rectify inaccuracies, and fulfill requests for erasure in accordance with privacy laws. Furthermore, privacy laws mandate implementing robust security measures to protect personal data. Data inventories help organizations identify their personal data types and all associated security requirements. By clearly understanding the data they process, organizations can implement appropriate technical and organizational safeguards to shield personal data from unauthorized access, loss, or alteration, thus ensuring compliance with security obligations under privacy laws. Privacy breaches and data breaches. A data breach occurs when information is read, modified, or deleted without authorization. Read, in this sense, can mean either seen by a person or transferred to a network or storage media. A data breach is the loss of any type of data, but notably corporate information and intellectual property, while a privacy breach refers specifically to loss or disclosure of personal and sensitive data. Organizational consequences. A data or privacy breach can have severe organizational consequences. Reputation damage. Data breaches cause widespread negative publicity, and customers are less likely to trust a company that cannot secure its information assets. Identity theft. If the breached data is exploited to perform identity theft, the data subject may be able to sue for damages. Fines. Legislation might empower a regulator to levy fines. These can be a fixed sum or, in the most serious cases, a percentage of turnover. Intellectual property, IP, theft, loss of company data can lead to loss of revenue. This typically occurs when copyright material, unreleased movies, and music tracks is breached. The loss of patents, designs, trade secrets, and so on to competitors or state actors can also cause commercial losses, especially in overseas markets where IP theft may be difficult to remedy through legal action. Notifications of breaches. The requirements for different types of breaches are set out in law and/or in regulations. The requirements indicate who must be notified. A data breach can mean the loss or theft of information, the accidental disclosure of information, or the loss or damage of information. Note that there are substantial risks from accidental breaches if effective procedures are not in place. If a database administrator can run a query that shows unredacted credit card numbers, that is a data breach, regardless of whether the query ever leaves the database server. Depending on the regulations, a breach may be considered to have occurred if there is just the potential for unauthorized access. For example, if a personal data file is configured with permissions that mistakenly allow any authenticated user to read it, This could be classed as a notifiable data breach, even if audit logs show that no actual improper access attempts were made. Escalation. A breach may be detected by technical staff, and if the event is considered minor, there may be a temptation to remediate the system and take no further notification action. This could place the company in legal jeopardy. Any breach of personal data and most breaches of IP should be escalated to senior decision makers and any impacts from legislation and regulation properly considered. Public notification and disclosure. Other than the regulator, notification might need to be made to law enforcement, individuals and third-party companies affected by the breach, and to the public through press or social media channels. For example, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, sets out reporting requirements in legislation requiring breach notification to the affected individuals, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and, if more than 500 individuals are affected, to the media, HHS, gov/HIPAA/ for professionals breach notification index, HTML. The requirements also set out timescales for when these parties should be notified. For example, under GDPR, notification must be made within 72 hours of becoming aware of a breach of personal data. cso-online.com/article/3383244/how-to-report-a-data-breach- under-GDPR, Regulations will also set out disclosing requirements, or the information that must be provided to each of the affected parties. Disclosure is likely to include a description of what information was breached, details for the main P. Ointment of contact, likely consequences arising from the breach, and measures taken to mitigate the breach. GDPR offers stronger protections than most federal and state laws in the United States, which tend to focus on industry-specific regulations, narrower definitions of personal data, and fewer rights and protections for data subjects. The passage of the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, has changed the picture for domestic U.S. legislation. However, csoonline.com/article/32925 Compliance. Security compliance refers to organizations' adherence to applicable security standards, regulations, and best practices to protect sensitive information, mitigate risks, and ensure data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Effective compliance necessitates establishing and implementing policies, procedures, controls, and technical measures to meet the requirements set forth by regulatory bodies, industry standards, and legal obligations. Impacts of noncompliance. Noncompliance with data protection laws and regulations can have severe consequences for organizations. The consequences vary depending on jurisdiction and the specific regulations violated. Common ramifications for noncompliance include legal sanctions such as financial penalties, legal liabilities, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Sanctions refer to penalties, disciplinary actions, or measures imposed due to noncompliance with laws, regulations, or rules. Sanctions are enforced by governing bodies, regulatory authorities, or organizations overseeing the specific domain in which the noncompliance occurred. Regulatory agencies may impose substantial fines, which can amount to millions or even billions of dollars, depending on the severity of the violation. Legal action from affected individuals or data subjects may lead to costly lawsuits and settlements. Noncompliance can harm an organization's reputation, eroding customer trust, decreasing business opportunities, and potentially losing contracts or partnerships. Organizations may also face additional regulatory scrutiny, including increased audits, investigations, or mandated remediation measures. Organizations must prioritize data protection compliance, implement appropriate security measures, conduct regular risk assessments, and stay informed about evolving data protection laws and regulations to avoid these consequences. Due diligence in the context of data protection describes the comprehensive assessment and evaluation of an organization's data protection practices and measures. It involves examining and verifying the adequacy of data security controls, privacy policies, data handling procedures, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Software licensing. Noncompliance with software licensing requirements can result in the revocation of usage rights and other consequences, such as fines. Violations of license agreements, such as exceeding permitted installations, unauthorized sharing, or other unauthorized usage, constitute contractual noncompliance. Other forms of noncompliance include breaching license terms, such as modifying code or distributing software without authorization. In response, software vendors or licensing authorities may revoke or suspend licenses and take other legal actions. The loss of software licenses can disrupt business operations, causing inefficiencies and workflow interruptions, as well as cause significant reputational damage. To ensure compliance, organizations can rectify noncompliance through license remediation, proper license management, and audits. Impacts of contractual noncompliance. Breach of contract. Noncompliance can result in a breach of contract. Contracts between parties often include provisions related to data protection, cybersecurity measures, and the safeguarding of sensitive information. Failure to meet these contractual obligations can lead to legal consequences, including potential liability for damages or loss resulting from noncompliance. Termination of contracts. Noncompliance may give the compliant party grounds for contract termination. Contractual agreements may contain clauses allowing termination if the other party fails to protect data or implement sufficient cybersecurity measures adequately. The noncompliant party may face termination penalties, loss of business relationships, and the need to seek new contractual arrangements, which will be complicated by poor past performance. Indemnification and liability. Noncompliance may result in the noncompliant party assuming liability for damages caused by a security breach or data loss. Contractual agreements may include indemnification clauses, shifting responsibility for losses, or legal expenses resulting from cybersecurity incidents onto the noncompliant party, leading to financial burdens and reputational damage. Noncompliance penalties. Contracts may stipulate penalties or financial consequences for noncompliance with cybersecurity requirements, such as monetary fines or contractual damages that the noncompliant party must pay to the aggrieved party. Noncompliance penalties aim to incentivize adherence to cybersecurity measures outlined in the contractual agreement. Rate your confidence.
Compliance is a major issue. There are some organizations that are forced to be heavily compliant, and there are others that don't follow compliance rules specifically. But to tell us more about how to make compliance meaningful, we have Gareth Marchant with us. Gareth, how you doing, man?
Hey, James. Glad to see you again.
Good to see you again. Tell us a bit about your work at Lighthouse as the owner,
Yeah.
and let's start talking about compliance.
Yeah. So for my company, I spend a lot of time helping folks, build programs and develop the programs, improve the programs, train their workforce in cyber and things like that. And compliance is definitely something that comes up a lot, especially in recent years, as there's more and more awareness and more sort of laws that are being passed, especially around privacy and things that sort of dictate how companies, run their cybersecurity programs.
When it comes to the issues of compliance or things there, what are the consequences of not being compliant to various standards?
Yeah, that's the really important consideration, right? Is a lot of times it boils down to fines. There are different regulations have different approaches to fines, but the fines are really significant. Can have a huge financial impact. Can even force a company out of business. But also there are reputational concerns that come with that as well. As a business, you've usually got customers, or as a government agency, maybe constituents that sort of depend upon and trust you to take care of their systems and their data. So when it turns out that you're not compliant with something that's so clearly laid out as a law or a regulation, it can have really long-term impacts to the business's health. The ability for that business to continue on, or for elected officials to maintain office. When under their watch, they've done something as serious as miss a compliance item.
Worldwide, what are some examples of some of these rules, regulations, et cetera, that need to be followed?
Yeah, yeah, that's it, right? The worldwide, this is what's interesting about cyber. Our systems now, especially with the emergence and use of the cloud,
Mm.
you can really run your systems anywhere. And so this is recognized and protected by especially privacy laws. So, despite the fact that we may be running a business here in the United States, if we're collecting information about someone that lives in the European Union has laws that sort of transcend their own borders, and anyone that has information on the European constituent has to comply with those laws. So it's not just so your own town or your own state, or even your own country. It's this sort of global concept, this global scope of laws that you have to take into consideration in order to be compliant.
Yeah, there's GDPR in Europe, for example. In the United States, for healthcare, there's HIPAA. Every country has their own, and like
Yeah,
you said, in addition to the consequences of your reputation being lost,
yeah,
the fines are definitely significant. When it comes to monitoring
yeah,
compliance, what are some of the things that are done to make sure that compliance is actually meaningful rather than just some sort of checkbox kind of
yeah.
thing?
Yeah, I mean, if you really take a step back and you look at some of these compliance, documents, the details that are included in there, they all describe elements of a strong cybersecurity program. So,
Mm.
ideally, if you've built a proper cyber program with all of the right bits and pieces from leadership through technology, you know, complying with the framework shouldn't be a huge stretch. But let's face it, the reality is that a lot of folks have a hard time just running IT, just keeping stuff up and running, keep it reliable. And it's very hard to build a cyber program if you don't have good IT in the first place. And so organizations oftentimes realize, gee, there's all these rules I have to comply with. I need to start turning all of those features on. I need to start implementing those things. However, it can be really difficult because there's all these prerequisites in order to be able to turn some of this stuff on.
It's interesting because as people want to say delve into the concept of privacy, they first have to make sure they get their cybersecurity ducks in a row, and before that, right, they have to make sure that
Yeah.
their IT processes are sound,
Yeah.
right, layered.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's this whole sequence of events, right, that leads up to being able to do that. And interesting enough, some of the new privacy laws that are out there have some of the steepest fines of any of the legal frameworks that are out there. And so it's the one that gets the most attention oftentimes because they realize just how big the fines can be, but yet being able to get into a point where you can implement the controls that privacy regulation requires, there's oftentimes a big gap. And so that's where it goes back to having strong leadership to be able to identify what those gaps are. When we talk about, measuring compliance, there's going to be a gap. It may be a big gap, it may be a little gap, but what's important is recognizing what you're supposed to do and then taking that list of things that you realize you need to implement and maybe working with project managers to develop a program that has projects in it that sort of move you along towards becoming compliant to whatever regulation it is that you need to comply with, regulations in plural that you must comply with.
Well, Gareth, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate talking to us about what effective security compliance is all about.
You bet, James. Thanks so much.
You bet, man. Bye-bye.
Monitoring and reporting. Compliance monitoring and reporting processes involve systematically assessing, evaluating, and reporting an organization's adherence to laws, regulations, contracts, and industry standards. Effective reporting and monitoring require establishing a compliance framework, conducting ongoing monitoring activities, and collecting relevant data for analysis. The findings of these activities are included in various reports designed to communicate compliance performance, identify non-compliance issues, and recommend actions. These processes aim to ensure accountability, mitigate risks, and drive continuous improvement in compliance practices. Compliance monitoring involves risk assessments, data collection, and analysis, while compliance reporting facilitates stakeholder communication and decision-making. Robust compliance monitoring and reporting processes help organizations proactively identify areas of noncompliance to enhance risk management practices and maintain stakeholder trust. Internal and external compliance reporting. Internal and external compliance reporting aim to assess and disclose an organization's compliance status, but they differ in scope, audience, and purpose. Internal compliance reporting primarily serves internal stakeholders such as risk managers, executives, security analysts, and privacy officers, focuses on operational details, and supports internal decision-making. External compliance reporting targets external stakeholders such as shareholders, customers, clients, regulators, vendors, and business partners, adheres to regulatory requirements, and provides high-level summaries of an organization's compliance performance. Both reporting forms promote accountability, transparency, and effective compliance management within organizations. Compliance monitoring. Compliance with legal and regulatory requirements, industry standards, and internal policies can be ensured through diligent monitoring of an organization's actions. This involves conducting thorough investigations and assessments of third parties, such as vendors or business partners, to ensure they comply with relevant regulations. Moreover, taking reasonable precautions and implementing necessary controls to protect sensitive information and prevent noncompliance is essential. Attestation and acknowledgement are also integral to compliance monitoring, requiring individuals or entities to formally acknowledge their understanding of compliance obligations and commitment to adhere to them through signed agreements, policy acknowledgements, and training activities. This provides evidence of an individual or organization's commitment to compliance and serves as the foundation for monitoring and enforcement. Compliance monitoring can be conducted internally or externally, with self-assessments, internal audits, and reviews conducted internally and independent audits, assessments, or regulatory inspections conducted externally. Automation is vital in compliance monitoring, with compliance management software being a critical tool in data collection, analysis, and reporting. Automation streamlines monitoring activities, improves accuracy, and enhances the ability to detect noncompliance or anomalies promptly. Rate your confidence.
Continue.
Data protection. Classifying data as at rest, in motion, and in use is crucial for effective data protection and security measures. By analyzing data based on its state, at rest, in motion, in use, organizations can tailor security measures and controls to address the specific risks and requirements associated with each data state. This classification helps organizations identify vulnerabilities, prioritize security investments, and ensure appropriate safeguards to protect sensitive data throughout its lifecycle. It also facilitates compliance with data protection regulations and industry best practices. Data at rest. This state means that the data is in some sort of persistent storage media. Examples of types of data that may be at rest include financial information stored in databases, archived audiovisual media, operational policies and other management documents, system configuration data, and more. In this state, it is usually possible to encrypt the data using techniques such as whole disk encryption, database encryption and file, or folder-level encryption. It is also possible to apply permissions, access control lists, ACLs, to ensure only authorized users can read or modify the data. ACLs can be applied only if access to the data is fully mediated through a trusted OS. Data in transit or data in motion. This is the state when data is transmitted over a network. Examples of types of data that may be in transit include website traffic, remote access traffic, data being synchronized between cloud repositories, and more. In this state, data can be protected by a transport encryption protocol, such as TLS or IPsec. With data at rest, there is a greater encryption challenge than with data in transit, as the encryption keys must be kept secure for longer. Transport encryption can use ephemeral session keys. Data in use, or data in processing. This is the state when data is present in volatile memory, such as system RAM or CPU registers and cache. Examples of types of data that may be in use include documents open in a word processing application, database data that is currently being modified, event logs being generated while an operating system is running, and more. When a user works with data, that data usually needs to be decrypted as it goes from at rest to in use. The data may stay decrypted for an entire work session, which puts it at risk. However, trusted execution environment (TE) mechanisms such as Intel Software Guard extensions software, intel.com/content/www/us/ and /develop/topics/software-guard-extensions/details HTML are able to encrypt data as it exists. Geographic restrictions. Geographic restrictions involve limiting access to data based on specific geographic locations. It ensures that data is accessible only from approved regions, providing additional control and security. A common use case for geographic restrictions involves cloud computing and data storage services. When organizations utilize cloud platforms or third-party data centers to store their data, they may need to enforce geographic restrictions to specify where their data can be stored and processed to comply with data protection laws and regulations. Encryption. Encryption converts data into a coded format that can only be accessed or deciphered with an encryption key or password. It protects data confidentiality and ensures that even if data is intercepted, it remains unreadable to unauthorized parties. Hashing. Hashing involves converting data into a fixed-length string of characters using a hashing algorithm. Hashing is commonly used to verify data integrity and securely store passwords. Masking. Masking involves replacing sensitive data with fictional or partially concealed values while preserving the format and length of the original data. It prevents exposing sensitive information and is often used to hide sensitive data fields and password characters entered into forms. Tokenization. Tokenization replaces sensitive data with a randomly generated token while securely storing the original data in a separate location. Tokens have no meaningful value, reducing the risk of unauthorized access or exposure of sensitive information. A common use case for data tokenization is in payment processing systems. When customers make a payment, their sensitive payment card information, such as credit card numbers, is replaced with a randomly generated token. This token is then used to represent the payment card data during transactions and is stored in the system's database. Obfuscation. Obfuscation involves modifying data to make it difficult to understand or reverse engineer without altering functionality. Software development commonly uses obfuscation techniques to protect source code intellectual property and prevent unauthorized access to critical details. Examples of obfuscation include data masking, data type conversion, and hashing. Segmentation. Segmentation is a method of securing data by dividing networks, data, and applications into isolated components to improve sensitive data protection, limit the impact of a breach, and improve network security. Segmentation helps restrict access based on user roles, privileges, location, or other criteria. It helps limit exposure by granting access only to the specific data segments required for authorized users or processes. A common use case for data segmentation is in healthcare systems or electronic health records, EHRs. Patient data is often categorized and segmented in these systems based on various factors, such as medical conditions, departments, or access levels. Data segmentation allows healthcare professionals to control and limit access to sensitive patient information based on the principle of least privilege. Different healthcare providers, specialists, or departments may have access only to the specific patient data relevant to their roles or treatment responsibilities. Permission restrictions. Permission restrictions involve controlling access to data based on user permissions. It ensures that only authorized individuals or roles can view, modify, or interact with specific data elements, reducing the risk of unauthorized access, data breaches, or accidental misuse. Access control lists, role-based access control, rule-based access control, mandatory access control, attribute-based access control, and other methods enforce the principle of least privilege. Rate your data loss prevention. To apply data guardianship policies and procedures, smaller organizations might classify and type data manually. An organization that creates and collects large amounts of personal data will usually need to use automated tools to assist with this task, however. There may also be a requirement to protect valuable intellectual property, IP data. Data loss prevention, DLP, products automate the discovery and classification of data types and enforce rules so that data is not viewed or transferred without a proper authorization. Such solutions will usually consist of the following components: Policy server, to configure classification, confidentiality, and privacy rules and policies, log incidents, and compile reports. Endpoint agents, to enforce policy on client computers, even when they are not connected to the network. Network agents, to scan communications at network borders and interface with web and messaging servers to enforce policy. DLP agents scan content in structured formats, such as a database with a formal access control model, or unstructured formats, such as email or word processing documents. Data transformation is applied to unstructured data to render it in a consistent, scannable format for policy enforcement. The transfer of content to removable media, such as USB devices or by email, instant messaging, or even social media, can then be blocked if it does not conform to a predefined policy. Most DLP solutions can extend the protection mechanisms to cloud storage services, using either a proxy to mediate access or the cloud service provider's API to perform scanning and policy enforcement.
Description.
The page is titled Security and Compliance. The menu on the left reads Home, Alerts, Permissions, Classifications, Data Loss Prevention, Data Governance, Threat Management, and Search and Investigation. The subhead under Data Loss Prevention read Policy, Selected, Device Security Policies, and Device Management. The menu to its right is titled New DLP Policy. The radio buttons for Choose the Information to Protect, Name Your Policy, and Choose Locations are selected, and for Policy Settings and Review Your Settings are not selected. The Policy Settings tab is highlighted. The section on the right is titled Customize the Type of Content You want to Protect. Few lines of text are written below the title. A radio button for Find Content that contains U.S. Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, ITIN, U.S. Social Security Number, SSN, and U.S/U.K passport number is selected. A checkbox for Detect when this content is shared with people outside my organization is selected. A radio button for Use Advanced Settings is not selected. Back, Next selected, and Cancel buttons are at the bottom. Creating a DLP policy in Office 365. Screenshot used with permission from Microsoft. Remediation is the action the DLP software takes when it detects a policy violation. The following remediation mechanisms are typical. Alert only. The copying is allowed, but the management system records an incident and may alert an administrator. Block. The user is prevented from copying the original file but retains access to it. The user may or may not be alerted to the policy violation, but it will be logged as an incident by the management engine. Quarantine. Access to the original file is denied to the user or possibly any user. This might be accomplished by encrypting the file in place or by moving it to a quarantine area in the file system. Tombstone. The original file is quarantined and replaced with one describing the policy violation and how the user can release it again. When it is configured to protect a communications channel such as email, DLP remediation might take place using client-side or server-side mechanisms. For example, some DLP solutions prevent the actual attaching of files to the email before it is sent. Others might scan the email attachments and message contents, and then strip out certain data or stop the email from reaching its destination. Rate your confidence.
Continue. Category.
Topic 16A, Data Classification and Compliance. Report content errors. Copyright CompTIA Incorporated. All rights reserved. Terms of Use Privacy Statement Trademarks. Welcome to CERT Master Learn for Security Plus. Welcome to CERT Master Learn for Security Plus. Using CERT Master Learn. Using CERT Master Learn. Topic 16b. Personnel policies. Exam objectives covered. 5.6 Given a scenario, implement security awareness practices. Personnel policies play a vital role in establishing clear guidelines, expectations, and standards for employees. They provide a framework for effective management of human resources and maintain a fair, legally compliant, and productive work environment. Personnel policies promote consistency, clear communication, employee development, conflict resolution, and risk management. Organizations can enhance employee satisfaction, attract and retain talent, and mitigate legal and operational risks by implementing effective personnel policies. Rate your confidence. Conduct policies. Operational policies include privilege/credential management, data handling, and incident response. Other important security policies include those governing employee conduct and respect for privacy. Acceptable use policy. Enforcing an acceptable use policy, AUP, is important to protect the organization from the security and legal implications of employees misusing its equipment. Typically, the policy will forbid the use of equipment to defraud, defame, or to obtain illegal material. It will prohibit the installation of unauthorized hardware or software and explicitly forbid actual or attempted snooping of confidential data that the employee is not authorized to access. Acceptable use guidelines must be reasonable and not interfere with employees' fundamental job duties or privacy rights. An organization's AUP may forbid use of Internet tools outside of work-related duties or restrict such use to break times. Code of conduct and social media analysis. A code of conduct, or rules of behavior, sets out expected professional standards. For example, employees' use of social media and file sharing poses substantial risks to the organization, including threat of virus infection or systems intrusion, lost work time, copyright infringement, and defamation. Users should be aware that any data communications, such as email, made through an organization's computer system are likely stored within the system, on servers, backup devices, and so on. Such communications are also likely to be logged and monitored. Employers may also subject employees' personal social media accounts to analysis and monitoring to check for policy infringements. Rules of behavior are also important when considering employees with privileged access to computer systems. Technicians and managers should be bound by clauses that forbid them from misusing privileges to snoop on other employees or to disable a security mechanism. Use of personally owned devices in the workplace. Portable devices, such as smartphones, USB sticks, media players, and so on, pose a considerable threat to data security, as they make file copy so easy. Camera and voice recording functions are other obvious security issues. Network access control, endpoint management, and data loss prevention solutions can be of some use in preventing the attachment of such devices to corporate networks. Some companies may try to prevent staff from bringing such devices on site. This is quite difficult to enforce, though. Also important to consider is the unauthorized use of personal software by employees or employees using software or services that has not been sanctioned for a project, shadow IT. Personal software may include either locally installed software or hosted applications, such as personal email or instant messenger, and may leave the organization open to a variety of security vulnerabilities. Such programs may provide a route for data exfiltration, a transport mechanism for malware, or possibly software license violations for which the company might be held liable, just to name a few of the potential problems. Clean desk policy. A clean desk policy means that each employee's work area should be free from any documents left there. The aim of the policy is to prevent sensitive information from being obtained by unauthorized staff or guests at the workplace. Rate your confidence. User and role-based training. Another essential component of a secure system is effective user training. Untrained users represent a serious vulnerability because they are susceptible to social engineering and malware attacks and may be careless when handling sensitive or confidential data. Train users in secure behavior. Image by .shock copyright 123rf.com. Appropriate security awareness training needs to be delivered to employees at all levels, including end users, technical staff, and executives. Some of the general topics that need to be covered include the following: overview of the organization's security policies and the penalties for noncompliance, incident identification and reporting procedures, site security procedures, restrictions, and advice, including safety drills, escorting guests, use of secure areas, and use of personal devices. Data handling, including document confidentiality, PII, backup, encryption, and so on. Password and account management plus security features of PCs and mobile devices. Awareness of social engineering and malware threats, including phishing, website exploits, and spam plus use of software such as browsers and email clients plus appropriate use of internet access, including social networking sites. There should also be a system for identifying staff performing security-sensitive roles and grading the level of training and education required between beginner, intermediate, and advanced, for instance. Note that in defining such training programs, you need to focus on job roles rather than job titles, as employees may perform different roles and have different security training, education, or awareness requirements in each role. The NIST National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education Framework, NIST, gov/itel/applied-cybersecurity/NICE sets out knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSAS, for different cybersecurity roles. Security awareness programs are described in SP 800-50, NVL Pubs, NIST. Training topics and techniques. It is necessary to frame security training in language that end users will respond to. Education should focus on responsibilities and threats that are relevant to users. It is necessary to educate users about new or emerging threats, such as fileless malware, phishing scams, or zero-day exploits in software. But this needs to be stated in language that users understand. Using a diversity of training techniques helps to improve engagement and retention. Training methods include facilitated workshops and events, one-on-one instruction and mentoring, plus resources such as computer-based or online training, videos, books, and blogs/newsletters. Computer-based training and gamification. Participants respond well to the competitive challenge of Capture the Flag, CTF, events. This type of gamification can be used to boost security awareness for other roles too. Computer-based training, CBT, allows a student to acquire skills and experience by completing various types of practical activities. Simulations, recreating system interfaces, or using emulators so students can practice configuration tasks. Branching scenarios, having students choose between options to find the best choices to solve a cybersecurity incident or configuration problem. CBT might use video game elements to improve engagement. For example, students might win badges and level up bonuses such as skills or digitized loot to improve their in-game avatar. Simulations might be presented so that the student chooses encounters from a map and engages with a simulation environment in a first-person shooter type of 3D world. Critical elements for security awareness training.
Topic. Description.
Policy/handbooks. Policy and handbook training focus on familiarizing users with the organization's policies, procedures, and guidelines regarding data security, acceptable use of technology resources, data handling, and confidentiality, and emphasize the importance of adhering to these policies to maintain a secure work environment. Situational awareness. Situational awareness training enhances users' ability to recognize and respond to potential security threats or suspicious activities. It emphasizes the importance of being vigilant, observing surroundings, and promptly reporting any unusual or problematic incidents that may pose a security risk. Insider threat. Insider threat training focuses on educating users about the potential risks and signs of insider threats within an organization. It helps individuals recognize and report suspicious behavior, understand the impact of insider threats on data security, and promote a culture of trust and accountability in handling sensitive information. Password management. Password management training guides users on creating strong, unique passwords, avoiding password reuse, and implementing best practices for securing and safeguarding passwords. It emphasizes the importance of regularly updating passwords and using multi-factor authentication where available. Removable media and cables. Removable media and cable training educate users on the risks associated with the unauthorized use, loss, or theft of removable media, such as USB mass storage devices, and the potential for unauthorized access or data breaches. It also guides users on the risks associated with malicious charging cables designed as an attack vector for gaining unauthorized device access. Social engineering. Social engineering training raises awareness about common social engineering tactics employed by attackers, such as phishing, pretexting, or baiting. It helps individuals recognize and avoid falling victim to these manipulative techniques, encouraging skepticism and critical thinking when interacting with unknown or suspicious requests. Operational security. Operational security training focuses on promoting good security practices in day-to-day operations. It covers physical security, workstation security, data classification, secure communications, and incident reporting to help users understand their role in preventing security incidents. Hybrid/remote work environments. Hybrid/remote work training addresses the unique security challenges associated with working from home or outside the traditional office environment. It covers topics such as secure remote access, secure Wi-Fi usage, protecting physical workspaces, and maintaining data security while working remotely. Training employees about safe computer use is critical to protecting data and mitigating the risks associated with cyberattacks. Image by Rawpixel, copyright 123rf.com. Phishing campaigns. Phishing campaigns used as employee training mechanisms involve simulated attacks to raise awareness and educate employees about the risks and consequences of falling victim to such attacks. By conducting mock phishing exercises, organizations aim to enhance threat awareness, protect sensitive information, mitigate social engineering risks, promote incident response, and strengthen security practices. Phishing attacks are prevalent and pose significant risks to many industries, making it essential for employees to know how to defend against them. Phishing is an effective attack vector due to its exploitation of human vulnerabilities, deceptive impersonation of trusted entities, psychological manipulation, broad reach, ease of use, dynamic capabilities, adaptability, and the potential for significant financial gain. These factors make phishing attacks difficult to detect, mitigate, and underscore the importance of practicing vigilance and regularly training employees to recognize and respond effectively to phishing attempts. Through training, employees become more aware of common phishing techniques and deceptive tactics used by cybercriminals. This knowledge helps them to identify and report suspicious emails or messages, reducing the likelihood of data breaches and unauthorized access to sensitive information. By training employees to recognize phishing attempts, organizations mitigate social engineering risks. Employees learn to identify messages that use common tactics such as urgent requests, spoofed identities, and enticing offers to manipulate individuals. This knowledge helps protect employees and their organization from disclosing credentials or confidential data, or installing malware. Effective training enables employees to respond appropriately to phishing attempts, such as reporting incidents to specific IT or security teams, refraining from clicking suspicious links or opening attachments, and verifying requests sent via email using alternative channels. Training employees to recognize and respond to phishing attempts strengthens an organization's cybersecurity defenses. It cultivates a culture of security awareness, empowers employees to protect sensitive information actively, and enhances the organization's resilience against evolving threats. Complemented by simulated phishing campaigns, regular training programs help build a knowledgeable and security-conscious workforce. Anomalous behavior. Anomalous behavior recognition refers to actions or patterns that deviate significantly from expectations. Examples include unusual network traffic, user account activity anomalies, insider threat actions, abnormal system events, and fraudulent transactions. Techniques such as network intrusion detection, user behavior analytics, system log analysis, and fraud detection are utilized to identify anomalous behavior. These techniques require monitoring and analyzing different data sources, comparing observed behavior against established baselines, and utilizing machine learning algorithms to detect deviations. Recognizing risky behaviors. Risky behaviors are actions or practices that threaten data security, systems, or networks. These behaviors may involve unsafe online activities, such as clicking on suspicious links, visiting untrusted websites, or downloading unauthorized software. Risky behaviors can also include neglecting security measures, such as using weak passwords, sharing credentials, or ignoring software updates. Unexpected behaviors are actions that deviate from established security protocols or violate security policies. These behaviors can occur due to a lack of awareness, carelessness, or a failure to follow established procedures. Examples include unauthorized access to sensitive information, bypassing security controls, or disregarding physical security measures. Unintentional behaviors refer to actions without malicious intent, but can still have detrimental consequences. These behaviors often stem from human error, lack of training, or lack of understanding of security best practices. Examples include accidental data breaches, mishandling of confidential information, or falling victim to social engineering attacks. All three types of behaviors, risky, unexpected, and unintentional, can lead to security incidents, data breaches, or the compromise of sensitive information. Individuals must be aware of these behaviors, follow security guidelines, stay informed about emerging threats, and practice good cybersecurity hygiene. Organizations are responsible for training and educating employees about these behaviors to promote a security-conscious culture and minimize the impact of human-related vulnerabilities in the cybersecurity landscape. Security Awareness Training Lifecycle. Security awareness training practices typically follow a life cycle approach consisting of several stages.
Description.
The phases are as follows: assessment, planning and design, development, delivery and implementation, evaluation and feedback, ongoing reinforcement and monitoring and adaptation. Security awareness training life cycle. The first phase is assessing the organization's security needs and risks. Planning and designing awareness training activities follow, where a comprehensive plan is developed, including objectives, topics, and delivery methods. Once a plan is created, the development stage focuses on creating engaging and informative training materials. Training is then delivered through previously identified delivery methods, such as in-person or computer-based sessions. Evaluation and feedback activities assess the training's effectiveness and gather participant insights. Security awareness is reinforced via recurring training activities to ensure it remains a priority and often includes refresher training, reminders, newsletters, and awareness campaigns. Monitoring and adaptation allow organizations to continually evaluate the program's impact and make necessary adjustments based on emerging risks and changing requirements. Organizations can establish a continuous and effective security awareness training program by following this life cycle. It helps enhance employee knowledge, steer behaviors, and cultivate a security culture within the organization. Regular assessment, evaluation, and adaptation ensure that training remains relevant and addresses evolving security threats. A well-structured security awareness training program significantly contributes to mitigating risks, protecting sensitive data, and building a resilient cybersecurity posture. Development and execution of training. Successfully executing security training means effectively providing education and instruction to employees and staff that enhance their knowledge, skills, and awareness of security practices. It involves delivering training programs addressing relevant security topics like data protection, incident response, phishing awareness, secure coding practices, physical security, and many others. Content development focuses on creating engaging and informative training materials, using clear language, and incorporating real-world examples to enhance relevance and mix. Interactive elements like quizzes, case studies, or simulations to encourage active participation, critical thinking, and practical application of knowledge. Facilitating dialogue, discussion, and question and answer sessions further enhance the learning experience. To assess the effectiveness of security awareness practices, collecting feedback, conducting assessments, and developing relevant measurements and metrics help gauge the impact of the training and identify areas for improvement. Regular reviews and updates to training materials ensure that its content remains relevant and aligned with evolving security threats. Incorporating emerging best practices and industry trends help organizations stay current and enhance their security awareness practices. Reporting and monitoring. One way to gauge the efficacy of security awareness training is to assess its influence initially and through ongoing evaluations. Initial effectiveness refers to the immediate impact of security awareness training on participants. It measures the knowledge gained, awareness raised, and behavioral changes observed immediately after completing a training program. Evaluation methods can include pre- and post-training assessments, quizzes, and surveys designed to gauge participant understanding of security concepts before and after training. Measuring initial effectiveness provides insight into the immediate impact of training and how participants have absorbed the information and concepts presented. Recurring effectiveness assesses the long-term impact and sustainability of security awareness training by examining whether participants have retained and applied the knowledge and skills gained from training in their day-to-day activities. The focus is to measure the continued behavioral changes and the level of security consciousness within the organization over an extended period. Initial and recurring effectiveness measurements are crucial to gauge the overall impact of security awareness training. While measuring initial effectiveness shows the immediate outcomes and knowledge uptake, recurring effectiveness measurements ensure that the training has a lasting effect and leads to sustained improvements in security practices. Assessments and quizzes. Conducting pre- and post-training assessments and quizzes allow organizations to measure the knowledge gained by employees during training. These reports provide quantitative data regarding training effectiveness related to knowledge retention and comprehension. Incident reporting. Organizations can track and analyze incident reports to assess the training program's impact on incident detection and response, identifying any patterns or trends. Phishing simulations. Conducting simulated phishing campaigns helps organizations evaluate employees' ability to recognize and respond to phishing attempts. Reports generated from these simulations provide data on click rates, successful phish captures, and trends in susceptibility, indicating the effectiveness of the training in mitigating phishing risks. Observations and feedback. Managers and supervisors can provide feedback on employees' security practices and behaviors. Qualitative information such as this provides valuable insights into the practical application of training and any challenges employees face in implementing the knowledge gained. Metrics and performance indicators. Tracking relevant metrics, such as the number of reported incidents, employee compliance with security policies, or changes in password hygiene, provides quantitative data on the impact of security awareness training. These metrics help measure the effectiveness of the training program over time. Training completion rates. Monitoring the completion rates of security awareness training modules or sessions indicates employee engagement and adherence to training requirements. Higher completion rates suggest better participation and performance of the training content. Lesson 16.
Summary.
You should be able to explain the importance of data governance policies and tools to mitigate the risk of data breaches and privacy breaches, and implement security solutions for data protection. Guidelines for data privacy and protection. Follow these guidelines for creating or improving data governance policies and controls. Ensure that confidential and personal data is classified and managed using an information lifecycle model. Assign roles to ensure the proper management of data within its lifecycle. Develop classifications for confidential and personal information based on standard descriptors such as public, private, sensitive, confidential, critical, proprietary, PII, health information, financial information, and customer data. Use a content management system that enables classification tagging of files and records. Use encryption products to ensure data protection at rest, in transit, and in processing. Use training and education programs to help employees to recognize attacks and suspicious behavior. Use policies and procedures that hinder social engineers from eliciting information or obtaining unauthorized access. Use training and education programs to help employees maintain the safety and security of the organization's data assets. Rate your